Stephen Long Mitchell, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
As I was saying a little bit before we started recording, I did some research on you, and I don't know if you'll be horrified, but I think I read even the earliest things that you wrote on TV, including The Love Boat.
That's well, I am a little horrified because it reminds me of how old I am. Luckily, I got very lucky. Right out of college, I sold the second script I wrote, so I've been doing this a long time. But it's nice to know that there are people who are still alive who were around to watch The Love Boat.
Do you even remember what the episode was about?
Oh yeah, I remember because it was the first script I sold.
Okay.
And it was, for lack of a better thing, it's like we had two older actors that came on. It was Dorothy McGuire and Ralph Bellamy. And, Ralph Bellamy was convinced that Dorothy McGuire was Amelia Earhart.
I do remember the episode. Yeah. I definitely saw that.
So what was funny is we wrote it spec and sent it to the people at Love Boat. We had not even met with them. We met with a couple story editors, and they kind of sent us a note going, haha, it's very funny that you would send this to us, but that's not how show business works. You have to have an agent. You have to have this. You have to sign this thing. And we said, well, we'll sign anything. And we'd written it in about overnight one night. It was a Super Bowl Saturday to Super Bowl Sunday. We wrote it and sent it to them that next Monday. And anyhow, about 30 minutes after, they said, we'll send you an NDA. And they hadn't even sent it yet. They called and said, congratulations, you sold your first script. And I think what it was is they had not done an episode with that twist. And at that point in their run, they'd done 800 stories. So it was like, we need this. So it all worked out great for us.
Was Julie still on the cast at the time, the cruise director?
Yeah. Julie was still there.
All right.
This was the second to third to last season. And, I wasn't even, to be honest with you, I think I watched 3 episodes of The Love Boat. We just happened to have met someone who worked there. And we thought, it's her in.
Yeah.
So we would take any chance we could at that point in our careers.
The youngsters watching this, and by youngsters, I mean probably anybody under 40, have no idea what we're talking about.
Not a clue.
But that was I wouldn't say it was a good show, but it was an important show.
It was a very, very successful show too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they probably did 1,000 stories over their 12 or 14-year run. And, that was just one of the many things that Aaron Spelling did. But it was it was back when it was, I don't want to say it was junk food, but it was certainly a staple on whatever, I don't even remember what night it was on, but it was a staple.
ABC Saturday nights, as I recall.
That's kind of what I remember as well.
Well, I remember watching it sometimes after hockey night in Canada. So that's,
okay.
There you go. But the thing that was interesting about it was that you had so many character actors and so many actors. Like Ralph Bellamy was a big deal back in the day.
Oh, sure.
Right. He still was to anyone who remembered him. But and you just had a steady stream of all these and all these people. Like when I watched, I was pretty young, so I didn't know I had no idea who Ralph Bellamy was. Later on, I got to see so many of his movies. And did you see His Girl Friday with Cary Grant?
Sure.
And Rosalind Russell. So he's in that, and he plays the foil. And there's one line that's hilarious in it where Cary Grant is hiring a thug to beat him up. And he, as an aside, he kind of ad-libs and says, oh, he looks like that actor, Ralph Bellamy.
Clever. Well, the thing about what Aaron Spelling was smart from a business standpoint was he would get a lot of those established iconic actors who would come and do the show, so that for the older audience, they would tune in because they'd grown up watching them. Yeah. And then he would get younger actors for a younger audience to watch, so everybody had something to glom onto. And it was a really smart business play that he did on that and on Fantasy Island. And he was just a very, savvy producer back in the day.
Yeah. Well, so as I was going through, your IMDb page, the other thing that I found so interesting is like you have, I think you're quote unquote known for is The Pretender. I love that show. That was awesome.
Well, thank you. It's it probably is was the love of my life as far as creativity goes, and as far as a passion project goes. I created it with Craig Van Sickle, and we turned the lights on at the beginning and turned them off at the end. But actually, it was a very, very successful show. It also was a spec script. And no spec scripts are ever, you know, really bought as far as pilots go. The only other one in the last 20 years or so that I know of was Desperate Housewives. But our script was really interesting because we wrote the script, sent it to the networks, NBC bought it, or actually they had a meeting with us and they said, if you change X, Y, and Z in this, we will put it on the air. And we said, or we'll make the pilot. And we said, well, if we change X, Y, and Z, it won't work. So keep your money. And we got up and walked out and they stopped us and said, no. Okay. We'll let you make it. And we thought, well, that was interesting, but it was all about creatively. Because it was spec and no one had paid us to write it, we had the freedom to not do it with anybody or compromise it. And at the end of the day, what ended up happening was after we shot the pilot, they hated it. NBC didn't hate, they hated it. After the first cut, they just like, we were not going to have any chance of being on the air. So Craig and I went back and we recut the film to be exactly the way we wanted it to be, because it hadn't turned out. They had pressured us to do certain things, and the director had done some of these things that we were kind of against, but at the time we were neophytes.
Do you have an example?
Well, it was just, yeah, I'll tell you. The key example is, because my hero was someone who could be anyone he wanted to be and would do things that were not usually done on TV at that point. For instance, my hero it was like kind of in the world of Catch Me If You Can, or of the old Tony Curtis movie, since we're talking about old movies, yeah. The Great Imposter.
Yeah,
was kind of based on The Great Imposter, which was a show about a guy, or a movie about a man named Ferdinand Damara. And what Ferdinand could do is he could like read a book on surgery, and he was so smart, he would walk into a surgical theater and operate on somebody. Right. And he literally did that. Then he taught medicine in Canada, by the way, right. For I think the Canadian Navy for a long time before they realized this guy's not a doctor. He's never gone to medical school. And then he had to go on the run. Well, for us, what it was if you're going to have someone walk in and pretend to be a doctor, and people know he's not really a doctor, they better really, really love him before he walks in there, because if not, he's a sociopath, and they are terrified of him. And so it was a certain balance where we had to do something up front that would make you love him before he did that. And then you were on board because you knew he was there to take down bad people who'd done it. In the case of our pilot, a drunk doctor who had operated on someone and severed his spine and had covered it up. Our guy went in as a doctor to unveil that. So anyhow, long story short, the first cut scared the audience and they didn't respond at all. So we recut it, and the second cut went out, and we thought, okay, we're dead, but we'll go down on our terms. And we got a call from some of the executives at NBC saying, what are you guys going to be doing Friday? And we thought, I don't know, what are we doing Friday? And they said, you're going to New York. You're on the air. America loves the pretender, and we don't know why. And that had to be the best quote of anything in my career. They didn't understand the show, but it had tested higher than any television show had tested, pilot episode of a television show had tested since Bonanza.
I could tell them why, because it was fucking awesome.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And it really is, and it's still to this day, the highest testing pilot for men, women, and children. Testing starts at 50%, and then by the end of testing, it was at 98% men, women, and children, which is, I don't even know if that's possible today because things are so niche oriented. But what was great about it was there was something about that show that spoke to, of course, I'm going to have, during this whole interview, there's a fly that's going to keep.
That's actually a little technical camera that we've got there for angles.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so okay, perfect.
If you could not break it, it's very expensive.
So anyhow, the point is, well, two things about the Pretender. One, it tested higher than anything. It was great. It's still there. I know why now, because they actually, Warren Littlefield at NBC framed the testing and gave it to us because he hadn't seen testing like that ever in his career. So two things that are interesting. One, the show has never gone off the air in France. Don't ask me why. They love it in France. And recently I've done a lot of business in China. And when I was over in China, I found out that it had aired in China and done really great in China. Now, the irony of that is you wouldn't think that a very Western-oriented television show would air or work that well in China. And it worked great. So that made me realize that there was something about the way it was constructed, the way it was written, and the way basically everything I've done and had written since then has appealed to a global audience, and globalization of entertainment is really what's going to be, I think, paramount going forward, or at least before the coronavirus came in. We'll talk about that in a second. The other thing is we found out about a few years ago that because of a legal screw up on the part of the original studio that we did this for, which was MTM, that little cat at the end. Mary Tyler Moore Studios. Someone screwed up, and all the rights have reverted back to me and my partner Craig.
That's a horrible screw up. You must be so upset about it.
Well, what's great about it is I'm terrified.
Heartbroken.
Yeah, I'm heartbroken. Anyhow, what's great about it is we can now develop it as feature film, as books. We've written a couple books, but we can bring it back to the audience now and redevelop it in the way we'd like to. The only thing we can't do is broadcast TV, which I don't know how long broadcast TV will even exist. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a question on, we think we can do streaming, obviously, because streaming didn't exist.
Not broadcast, yeah.
Right. And we will have discussions. We've talked about doing it all over the world in different variations and iterations, and hopefully that'll be something going forward that we'll be able to do well and announce in the not too distant future.
That's amazing. So you said something really cool that I want to kind of loop back on, that it tested higher than anything else before and since. And one of the things, I had this conversation. So my daughter's now 31. I've got my older daughter, and we've been having this ongoing conversation about culture and literature and comedy. And when, I don't know if you saw a little while back, maybe a year ago, one of the Comedy Central was counting down who the top comedians, stand-up comedians were of all time. And Steve Martin hit the top 10. And so I had this conversation with my daughter and said, okay, I sent her a link, said, watch this. Tell me, what do you think? And you remember in the era of the Wild and Crazy Guy when Steve Martin used to do these balloons, and he would, yep. And she watched it and she's like, that's not funny.
Yeah.
I said, all right, watch it again. Now this time, watch the audiences. And the audiences were like peeing in their pants laughing. Right. I remember, my best friend got the album. We sat and we're listening to it. I remember I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so hard. And I watched them again, and they're not funny. They are funny, but what caused the humor was he was breaking down some barriers that existed, and where the laughter came from is the absurdity of life.
Right.
And now every third-rate comic does that, so it's become trite and boring. But there was a time when no one did that, and it was. I mean, he deserves to be top 10. The stuff doesn't age well, but it really was true. And so we had this whole discussion. Wow, that really is true. It must have been funny because you look at the audiences and they're not pretending to laugh; they really are laughing. And so I'd love to see The Pretender again. As I remember it, I think it's still awesome. But I think some of what you were doing and why it tested so high is you were breaking down some barriers that now people will take it for granted. They'll go, well, you have to understand that it was before the Abigail story. Catch Me If You Can, right? Huge movie. It was hilarious. It was great. But if you're making a film, if you're making a TV series after that, it's very different than before that.
Sure.
And part of it, I think, that will always appeal to people is that here's somebody who's brilliant, who's using his talents for the good of mankind, and it's not sticking around to get by the time everything's been fixed, he's off to the next.
Well, one thing we did, and I agree with everything you said. One thing we did was, whoever he was there to help, whoever, if you would say is his client of the week, never knew he was there. He never acknowledged to anyone why he was doing what he was doing. He did it anonymously. And, in the world we live in, where it's like everybody has to have credit for everything, he took credit for nothing because that wasn't why he was doing it.
Which is so appealing. I love that.
Well, I think it's appealing. I think that aspect of it will be appealing going forward now, almost now more than ever. Also, there was a thing about, there's something about, the show is really about identity. who am I? I mean, because here's a guy who could be anyone he wants to be, but at his heart, he didn't know who he was. And that's what he was searching for.
But who he was a hero, whether he knew it or not.
Well, yeah, but the point was he had been stolen as a child. So and had been told his parents were killed in a plane crash. Or let me say it in reverse. He was told his parents were killed in a plane crash. He was a little genius, and that he was raised by this corporation to do all these kind of amazing things. And then he found out later they had been lying to him, that his parents, he had been kidnapped from his parents and stolen. And so now he broke away from the corporation to go out and try to find his parents. And that's what he was doing. And I think for all of us, and especially in the crazy world we live in, we're all trying to figure out who we are. So that's what he was doing. And he was helping people along the way. So nothing he was doing nothing was for self-aggrandizement. It was about the enjoyment of life itself.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad, like I enjoyed it at the age I enjoyed it, and it was just really terrific. And like I said, like if I had known that that's what you were doing, I'd reach out to you just to talk to you about it. I was just like, so serendipitous. But I just, want you to just know that I really appreciate that you're able to break some barriers and tell stories that weren't told before. And
well, thank you.
That's awesome. So shifting gears, so you did that quite a while ago. You've been writing. I see you moved to creating. I mean, this was a show you first, once you did that creation, you moved to creating your own shows and being more behind the scenes. What is your breakdown of how much you're creating shows, how much you're writing? And
well, since actually Craig and I had created and run one show before The Pretender. We in our career we've created 3. We've run 4 different shows. We have we wrote and produced a giant miniseries for Sci-Fi, which ended up becoming their highest rated miniseries, and I think programmed globally. I don't know if it is today. It was then, but I still think it kind of holds true today. And it was called Tin Man, which was a redo of The Wizard of Oz.
Yep, I remember it.
And since then I've been doing a lot of different things. Some that Craig and I do together, some that we've done separately. But I've developed, TV shows for China, and for doing a feature for I'm just writing the feature. I'll run the TV shows if they go, but I'm writing a feature for a production company out of Europe right now.
And so, do you enjoy writing more? Do you enjoy show running more? What's more fun for you?
Well, I'll tell you what, my grandfather taught me everything I know. He was a farmer. He taught me everything I know about life. And on his gravestone, it says he loved to tell the story. And he was this incredible storyteller. And I would just remember being a little boy and watch him as he told stories, and how people were just enthralled with the way he would do it, and the way he would surprise them. And he was very theatrical. So I think at the end of the day, I consider myself a storyteller more than I do a writer, or producer, or creator, because every little aspect of what you're doing is telling that story, and you surround yourself with people that help you tell the story. So I guess at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller. I enjoy all the aspects of it, quite frankly. But at the end of the day, probably my favorite part is probably sitting in the editing room and watching it all come alive as we put it all together and all the layers at the very end. But it all starts at the very beginning at that first word. So
you'd like to do a little of this and a little of that, whatever it takes to get the story out.
Yes, I mean, I'm a writer first and foremost, because that's the one thing that I've been fortunate to have written, produced, directed a lot of things within the business. It all comes down to who the writer is. And someone said this, or brought it to my attention, or defined it, where the writer is the only original artist in this business. He sits or she sits in front of a blank screen and says, "What if?" and writes a story and comes up with all the parts. And then it's handed to a director and producers and actors, and they interpret it. And then they try to tell that story and bring that story to life. But the seed of that comes from one mind. And, whether she's sitting there 12 hours a day in a dark room, she's coming up with that story, or he's coming up with that story. And I think that at the end of the day is still always going to be the most important part of any kind of entertainment.
That's amazing. The reason that I started this show was I'm passionate about everyday people doing their business, and particularly around the virus, what we're dealing with. As much as we hope the government whatever country you live in, the government is doing a good job. They're coping with what they're coping, but ultimately, we're going to have to figure this out for ourselves. We're going to have to get the economy going. We're going to have to tell stories. You know, there's all these different aspects of life. And so one thing about you is, in addition to, I mean, there are writers who just, you know, wrote a lot of good stuff, but you're, let's say you're a businessman in addition to being a writer. Like maybe part of telling a story is making sure that people hear the story and that it gets out.
Sure.
And so you take ownership for all of that. So, you know, how are you doing since this hit? You're staying at home. You're in Phoenix right now, in Arizona.
I'm at my daughter's right now in Phoenix. I live in Studio City, but I came over for a few days because she's pregnant. We're kind of helping out with a few things as she's getting moving.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, and which is also a weird thing to find out in the middle of this. It's like where you're sitting there worrying about, you know, will there be a future? So like, oh, here's the future right now.
Sure. My girl, yeah, it definitely. I have close friends who are also in the same situation. It's like you're excited for the baby, but like, do you really, you know, you hope everything's all right. You don't want any complications right now, right?
No, it's not at all. So let me go back and speak to your question. I mean, things have changed dramatically, I'm sure, in every business in the world. And that's really an interesting thing to say, every business in the world, you know, in every person's life in the world. For me personally, since I was developing 2 shows in China, the economy in China was not in great shape before this. Since this has happened, the entertainment industry in China has, in many ways, imploded. They, you know, they've shut down their theaters. I know they reopened some theaters for a day and then closed them all down, and they don't know when those theaters will open again. All the people who made movies are sitting there, and for some reason, they're not allowing most of their movies to be put on a streaming service. So everybody who made a movie is sitting there with like, we've got so much invested in these movies, we don't know what will ever happen or if they'll ever air, because there's, you know, a whole supply chain of movies coming right behind them that are made, and then there's some that are to be developed. So it's like in any business, it's a problem. Also, when you think there's a certain shelf life for movies and whatnot, and I also think too, it's like when you were talking about the difference between a show that aired 20 years ago and today, or a comedy from way back to today, and how things change. Well, people will view things totally differently going forward, no matter what it was that you've done, because they will judge it through the eyes of, you know, Corona. And it's sort of like, oh, that would never happen, or well, that doesn't make sense today because people wouldn't be that way. Or if you see people in a theater or on a subway train, you go like, nobody's wearing masks. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm sure
it's not realistic.
It's not realistic, even though it was, you know, made before
15 minutes ago.
Yeah. 15 minutes later, everything's changed. Here's a startling statistic. In the 2019 development cycle in all of China, because they develop slightly differently than we do here. Every single project that was developed in 2019, and I got this from my Chinese agents, has been canceled. Every single project in the entire country. So it doesn't matter if you're the American guy doing it, or if you're, I don't know, Jackie Chan, or the most established writer, producer in TV, everything was canceled.
That's going to be really hard to start up again, because all those people have to eat. So
exactly. So it is that. I mean, so that was kind of a very startling thing. But I've heard things here. I have a really good friend, Houston Howard, who you may want to talk to. He's kind of on the forefront of everything that's in the transmedia world and entertainment. And he also teaches this. So if you you can learn a great deal from him, because it's not only is he being reached out to by a lot of people in show business. He and I have do a transmedia company together, or I'm part of his company, let's say, to be more clear. And they're trying to figure out what to do with their product now, because, you know, he's had independent producers reach out to him from like South by Southwest, where it's like, we spent 3 years making this movie. It was about to premiere. South by Southwest is canceled. My investors are killing me. I have this product. There's nothing I can do with it now. To, you know, senior executives from Warner Brothers saying, we anticipate that theaters may be closed for a year, and we don't know what to do with our product or where we are going forward. We have to find different distribution systems, or what will be the way forward going forward in entertainment. I mean, we're all sitting around talking about how wonderful Tiger King is and watching everything there is on Netflix. But if you remember 6 weeks ago, most people would sit around going like, there's nothing on, even on Netflix.
Yeah.
Well, in another 6 or 8 weeks, and there'll be nothing on because you'll have watched everything on Netflix and Hulu and everything else. And then there's not a way to make it right now. So it's like, it's a very strange time. So my guess is that other kinds of entertainment vehicles will emerge. And I'm not saying they're TikTok or Quibi or who knows what it is, but it'll be things that can be made in a social distancing kind of format.
Well, I'm hoping they'll watch this.
Well,
That's
no,
the idea, right? Yeah.
well, I think you're right, because I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are sitting around going like, okay, I'm going to watch 4 TED Talks a day. I'm going to watch 3 podcasts, because this is going to be sort of like the newest content.
Right. It's real.
And it's real. And it's something where, I mean, I know I've watched a bunch, and it's because you want to reach out, you want to know what's going on, because you go to the news, it's the same thing over and over again. But what you really want to hear is like someone saying, okay, I lived in Wuhan, or I live in Italy, and here's what's going on with me, or here's my small business and what we're trying to achieve. For instance, my daughter has a small events rental business. Not a small, it was really growing and exploding, and she does corporate, and she does, everything from weddings to corporate to this and that. And she was on track to probably do her first $1 million year to zero.
It just makes you cry, right?
Well, and it's like,
I know people are in worse situations, but still, I mean, it's
sure.
like, yeah.
Well, especially if you look at your child and you go like, you're so proud that, 5 years ago she was doing it out of her garage. Now she has this enormous warehouse, and, she's grown so much. And now you sit there and you go like, oh my God, she's got this enormous warehouse full of all this stuff and overhead. And, the rug was just pulled out. It's one thing if the rug had been pulled out because she was not good at what she was doing. She's great at what she was doing.
Yeah.
But it's like the whole world is changing. We're all in this boat together, and we will all get out of this boat together. And as you were saying, it's not going to be the politicians who do it. I mean, thank God they put all these loans in place and this kind of stuff. Nobody knows what's right or wrong in this whole thing. It's like, I love Dr. Fauci and I love Dr. Birx. I hope they're right, and, you can.
I'm sure they hope they're right.
Yeah. I mean, because like, let's face it, I'm sure they're all sitting there going like, we're trying to go through this data and make the right decisions. And, you can love your leaders or hate your leaders right now, but they're the only ones we have.
Yeah.
They're going to get it. They're going to get us. I don't want to say going to get us out of this. One way or the other, we're going to get out of this. Hopefully their leadership will help us get out of this.
Totally.
Regardless of their stripes of politics and whatnot. I know I've gone off on a tangent as far as entertainment goes, but it's all kind of related.
I mean, our world is a tangent right now.
It is.
As I'm listening to what you're talking about, the fresh content, I think back, can't believe how long 9/11 was ago. But if you remember, the first Spider-Man came out with Tobey Maguire. And I remember seeing the early trailers, and they had Spider-Man web slinging between the Twin Towers.
Right.
And they cut that. I was kind of sad they cut it, but I could understand why they would, because they don't want to be unrealistic, or they don't want to, bring people down remembering that.
Sure.
But that was a relatively small change they could make, and it still worked.
Right.
This is it's just the different things that you thought were funny 6 weeks ago. They're not funny anymore, and things that you wouldn't think are funny are hilarious now. And so, and on a business level, like what you're talking about, it's the same thing. So I do some consulting for companies, and I had one client who, what he was dealing with 6 weeks ago was, my demand is exploding. I'm trying to make this business bigger. How do I responsibly, how much do I want to ramp up? How much risk do I want to take? And a couple of weeks later, he was calling me and going, so, you think I should lay off these people? How quickly should I lay them off? And how should I do that? And luckily, in his case, the demand picked up again. He's got kind of an essential business. So, things are okay. But where he went from, again, his biggest year ever, to let's try and survive this and not lose too much money. And he's a very fortunate one, right? I have other friends with businesses that are like, as I said, I've got some actor friends who they were on production, and they were like, yeah, we're not doing that. And then everyone's got to eat, and
Right. And when you look at it, it's like, okay, I'll take a television show or a movie. Yeah, all of those things are basically startup companies. People don't understand that completely if you haven't been in it, but each one is an individual startup. And within that startup, you have 200 or 300 people directly tied to it. But then you have, multiply that times 5 of where the person the catering person goes and buys their food, and who grows that food, and where that comes from, and the energy that is put into all those vehicles, or, the clothing that you buy for the actors to wear, or just kind of expand it out. And it's like everything is interrelated.
Yeah.
And so it's like, everybody's hurting. And that's one of the stranger things that, in many ways, I think it will help us all bond together, where we realize, because it is war. It is like we're at war with something that makes no sense. I mean, I'm sitting in Phoenix today, and it couldn't be more beautiful. And I'm looking around going like, and yet you go out in the street and it's like everybody has that same kind of dazed expression and look, because nobody has any kind of certainty in their life right now.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And we're all, either wearing masks or something cover our eyes and something cover our face. It looks like a Mad Max movie.
I mean, I hate to laugh about it, but it is funny. And then you sit there and it's like, I'm listening to the mayor of LA saying you have to wear a mask of some kind, and the other, the CDC is saying this mask does no good. And if you have one of these N95 masks, you shouldn't be wearing it. You should have someone at a hospital wearing it. And it's like, I don't even know what the rules are. And no one knows, like, here's what's really the rules. And so,
Well,
it just adds more to that confusion.
I actually spoke with an epidemiologist yesterday to actually go through that. I got to edit that and put that out. But, what he was saying was that it's mostly transmitted through touch, but where the mask will help you is if we have enough masks and everyone wears one, whoever has it but doesn't have symptoms yet
Won't be
can
spreading.
slow the spread. So it helps you if everyone wears it. You don't necessarily know if you're the one helping. Like
Right.
yeah. So it definitely helps. The problem is they didn't have enough masks. So then they're like, don't wear the mask because we don't want the doctors to run out. Totally get that. But the mask definitely helps you in 2 ways. More importantly, it helps if you're asymptomatic. That's where it really helps you.
So
But the other piece is to wear gloves.
Yeah, so it's sort of like your gloves and your mask are your uniforms that in the war you're fighting, even though you don't know if you're fighting it right now.
Yeah.
You're protecting your family or your loved ones or the rest of the world. That's I would edit that one before you edit mine and get it out first. Sure. It's more important than TV.
I got you. But well, the question really is though, like, and this is the thing I'm really straining with, 2 things. Like for myself, I'm like, this is either, I could take this as I'm going to somehow survive this thing and be alive on the other side. Or I can take this and say, you know what, this is my opportunity to level up. Where are the areas in my life? What are the creative projects? What are the things that I could do that really make a difference? Like in my case, there's some courses that one of my side hustles is just teaching courses. I teach negotiation skills. And by the way, your story of the first script you sold, you did some of the, by now you may know them, but some of the basic negotiation pieces you did right. You did it for creative reasons, but knowing what your bottom line is and not deviating from that and walking away from the deal rather than to compromise your most important terms, that's one of the big keys in negotiations, obviously why you did it well. So I'm looking like, okay, I used to do those in person. So I'm going to use this opportunity to build them online and build them out. And like, okay, I never looked at myself as a content creator, but what is it that I can do? What are my skills? What how can we make a difference for people? And and I think you have a lot to teach people in that area. That's
well, you know what, I want to lean into that. I've done a lot of speaking. I think that's kind of how we got together. I was speaking at the Academy of TV Arts and Sciences with Houston Howard, who I mentioned earlier, and where I met your brother, who hooked us up today. But since then I have gone around the world teaching writing and stuff. And what it was I was in China about a year ago doing this for Chinese writers, which was really an interesting thing because I'm doing the same speech I gave to your brother, having a translator, and it's a very emotional speech, and it's basically about teaching people the importance of the seeding the emotion of what you're putting into your story, and how you need to do it in a way where you can kind of cut through all the barriers that we have normally as human beings so that you can really feel it, and how it's very important for writers to do that, to be able to really bare their own soul, to connect to the emotionality in other people. And I actually learned it by writing The Pretender. It was like he did things that every time he would win, it was you would cheer for him, but you also, your heart would break for him because you knew he was giving up a piece of himself for others. Well, that's kind of the world we're in now. I should have been doing more of it. I'm going to really lean into it now because I realize that going forward, the educational system will change completely, and more of it will be on situations like this, which is good. I'm going to step back a second and talk about one of the other shows I did and how it relates to this. I think it was about 10 years ago, 12, I can't remember. There was a show called Medical Investigation. And we ran this show, and it was basically this. It was Dr. Fauci and a few other doctors who were called into situations where something had, some kind of, not pandemic, but something had broken out that could turn into a pandemic, and they'd have to go in and investigate what the problem was, fix it, and make sure that things go forward where people could be healthy. So we worked with the CDC, and they would come in and terrify us with all these kind of stories of things that you always looked at as science
unrealistic. That would never happen.
Well, unrealistic. That would never happen, but it's happening today.
Exactly.
And they were talking about the importance of what we did as far as getting the word out. And they came and specifically asked us to write an episode about the vaccine that they have for the human papilloma virus that has caused so many, I guess, cervical cancer and breast cancer in young women. And this was back before it had just come out, and they said, will you please do this, because we've got to spread this word. We've got to have, 12-year-old and 14-year-old kids getting this thing. And we did. And at the time, my kids were approaching those ages, and I said, okay, happy to do it. Several of the things we did in that show I'm watching today, the different kind of tobacco phages, which makes no sense to anybody, but it's like how they can do things that can help cure things based off of tobacco. And like people who used to smoke certain cigars would never get a certain disease, and they realized it was something growing within the tobacco, et cetera, et cetera. But here's one little story that you'll love. I was desperate to come up with an episode, and I came up with an idea of, it looked like an outbreak of the Spanish flu was coming back, and they needed to come up with a vaccine to stop it. So what we had them do is go and find and dig up a body of somebody who had survived the flu in 1918, still had the antigens or whatnot in their body. They were fresh. We made this all happen, and in the show, it was this miraculous cure and saved everybody. So about 6 months or so after that show was canceled, someone in Kentucky sent me an article that was based on an article from a Kentucky newspaper, and it was about how the CDC was developing a vaccine for the Spanish flu, and how they were doing basically everything that we've done. And about 4 or 5 paragraphs in, it said, we got the idea by watching an episode of Medical Investigation.
Wow.
So on the one hand, I was very proud. On the other hand, I thought, are you kidding me? You're the CDC. Why are you getting ideas from me? And all things, true. When I went to California I came to California to become a doctor, and then started doing stand-up. And actually, I was doing stand-up, and I got a job as a valet at the Playboy Mansion. And I was 17 years old. So you can imagine, it's like, I was just heady. I'm going into show business. This is wonderful. And I called my dad.
That's the best job you could possibly have at 17, right?
Every man who I've ever said this to from, 17 to 97 goes, oh, wow. And it's the best job you could have at 58, as far as I'm concerned. Anyhow, but the point is, within those stories, we educate each other, we learn from each other. I don't know if, it's in the article, so perhaps it is real that it gave someone the idea of like, well, maybe we could try this. At this point, we're in a world where we need to have as many stories out there that people can like climb on, because some 8-year-old somewhere is going to watch something one day and be inspired to go like, oh, I think I know how to fix this Corona thing, or anything that's in the Corona world, and we should do this. And we're depending on that 8-year-old to figure it out.
Well, I think the point you're making, what was the movie Something from the Gods, where the Coke bottle drops
Coke bottle,
down to
right?
the tribe from the tribe. What was the name of the movie? Do you remember? The Gods Must Be Crazy,
The gods must be crazy.
right? And what? So the conceit of the movie is that a Coke bottle drops in from an airplane, and completely intact, to this tribe that had never seen such a thing, and not knowing what that thing was, the number of uses, like it was a miraculous object. They didn't have blown glass, they didn't have perfectly round, you could use this thing as a cookie cutter, you could use, and people would fight about this Coke bottle. But the thing that's really striking about that movie is so much of the things you take for granted, they're creations. And once you realize, oh, what you think that thing is for, then that idea is creating a thing as much as the actual building the thing is. I don't know if I'm explaining the idea well.
No, exactly. It just is the first domino of the possibilities of that creation. And you may not see it when you're putting it together, but someone else goes like, oh, what if we did this? What if we did that? And that's how we are in the world we're in today, how some architect designed the library that's behind you to figure out how this would all work and the tools that were needed for this, and everything came from that. No, let's face it, if you go back to your Big Bang Theory, not the TV, the theory,
real one, yeah.
Everything's been here that's going to be here, and all we do is take it and mold it and shape it in different ways and have different thoughts of how we can take it and mold and shape it in more different ways that has created the world we live in, which gives me pretty much confidence that we'll figure out what the problem is with this Corona thing. We'll plan for the next one. We won't be ready because we don't know what the next one's going to be, but we'll be more ready. And every time we'll be more ready. And that's all we really can do.
Yeah. Well, you can argue that Gene Roddenberry invented the cell phone, right?
Sure.
Because he didn't work out the exact details, like
right.
the technology, the chip,
yeah.
and all that stuff. But the idea is like, I still remember Kirk, talking into this thing.
So let's give him credit for the flip phone. Okay. Since it did flip open. But yeah, it's like, but then somebody took it the next stage of the smartphone. And I remember when smartphones were coming out and people were like, why would anybody want a computer in their pocket? Well, now that computer in your pocket basically gives you connection to 98% of all the information in the entire planet has ever come out with. And it's pretty amazing. And that phone will allow entertainment to change and storytelling to change. And I want to go back to what that thing was about, my grandfather's quote about he loved to tell the story, which I think is a biblical quote. And I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone who knows the quote, and I don't. But the point is, we learn through story. No matter what we do, we learn through story. I'm telling you stories, you're telling me stories right now. Anybody watching this will learn from these stories. That is how things have been going since the first caveman drew pictures of, here's the elk on the wall, and here's this, and this is the tiger, and he has really sharp teeth. Don't go near the tiger, because if you go to the tiger, then, Benny dies. Don't mess with the tiger, right? So that drawing of Don't Mess with the Tiger is sort of the precursor of Tiger King today on Netflix in its own little way. But we told stories and we learned through the stories and we dramatized the story and we made those tiger teeth probably much bigger than they really were, so that everybody in the cave would go like, oh my God, don't go near the tigers. And you wanted to scare the hell out of them, so they didn't go near the tigers because survival was tied to that. So everything we do and learn in life is through a story some way or another, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a newscast, whether it's what we're doing here in this podcast, a TV show, a movie. So probably never in the history of time has it been more important to learn how to tell stories and to do them, find different mediums to get those stories across, because people learn much better through story than they do just through formulaic learning.
How are you doing on time? Because I have another thing I want to ask you. Okay.
I have nothing to do until the coronavirus is handled, so I'm good.
You're good. Well, one idea I wanted to explore with you, it's one thing to be able to write. It's another thing to be able to produce. It's another thing to see your ideas actually come to fruition. And I suspect that there's something about the way you go about creating stories that would be useful to everybody, no matter what their walk of life is. So what are some of the things that you do? Like how many projects were you working on before the virus hit?
Okay, before the virus hit, I was working on 2 different series, one of which I'd written the first, or along with a writing staff, had written the first 6 episodes and another 6 episodes of story. The other one was a massive 22 episode treatment for a series, or 24 episode treatment for a series, 100 pages of stuff. The other is a feature film, which I have probably a 100-page treatment for that. So it was a massive amount of different projects and juggling. But I've always done that. It's like whether I was doing it with Craig or not, we always had a lot of projects moving at the same time. Learning to be as efficient as you can within that process, I think, is important. And when you go to the aspect of being able to produce something, that's really the key, because that's when it really turns into business and it's not just creative. There's a lot of very, very creative people in this business. There's a lot of very, very great business people in the business. There's not a lot that can do both, because I think it's 2 different parts of your mind having to work. So it's like, I write this great creative story, and then it's sort of like, we have X amount of dollars to make it with, and in X amount of days. And you better plan for, as I like to say, a script is a battle plan, and as soon as you hit the beach, it all goes to shit, just like anything else.
Right.
But you have to learn to be flexible. And at the end of the day, it comes back to what I was saying earlier about, what do I have to do if, for instance, I get a place, I'm supposed to shoot with a helicopter at 4 in the afternoon, it's 10 in the morning, I'm shooting stuff, and I get a call, and this happened to me. It's too windy, the weather's changing, you have 1 hour to use the helicopter, and it has to go away. Well, I had 6 or 7 hours of stuff I needed to shoot before the helicopter. Now I have to use it. So it's like, and everybody in the crew turns around and looks at you and is like, what are we going to do? And it's all right, okay, you make a decision and you go, and then what you realize is, what's the most efficient way I can do this and still tell my story, because now I don't have the option of what I was planning for, and there is no more money. I worked for a producer named Stephen J. Cannell, who was one of the great writer producers of all time.
I still think of that typewriter.
Yeah, and then he throws that piece of paper. One of the great producers, one of the great human beings, and one of the great teachers in this business, because he would bring you in. It was like graduate school working for him. And he actually knocked on my door, or the door of our office one day, and said, "Do you want to create a show with me?" And it was like, yeah. And
what he would do, answer could you give other than,
and what it was, I'd worked for him for a year, and there was probably 50 writers that worked with him, and one show a year he would create with somebody, and he chose us. And it was wonderful, and it really made my career, and it made me a showrunner. But I think what it was is because I'd done so much stuff earlier on, and I showed him that I knew how to do it for the money, because this was his money at the time. It wasn't studio money, it was his money. And, he would give us, we would have 22 episodes in the air, and it was for the lowest budget you could possibly imagine. We had to shoot in 6 11-hour days. There was no overtime. It didn't exist. So it was like, you are locked down. There is no more money. Where in Hollywood, they just throw money at stuff, because not a lot of people know how to do both sides of it. So I learned in a situation where, if I didn't have money, how can I be creative? Because I am that first guy sitting there in front of the blank screen. How do I tell my story and not make it cost a lot of money? And I think that will be a really important thing going forward in the entertainment business, which could cause a problem because no one knows how to do it these days. And it's in any business. It's like, okay, here's the situation. Here's what it's going to cost. How am I going to have to cut costs now, especially in, to gin up this entire economy? We're going to have to figure out how to do that. How can I do it more efficiently, faster, still please the audience, if you will, which are our customers? How do I tell them the story that makes them happy with the product they get, which allows that product to fit into their life and the story where it's important to them? And I think it's going to take a lot of different efficiencies. I was very fortunate that I had worked for Steven and that I had learned to do things on a dime, because when I finally started directing, it's like, as a writer, you'd write something, you hand it to the director, and they go like, "That's impossible." And you're like, "Why? It was easy to write." But when it was my turn to go out on the floor and do it, I would read what I wrote and go like, "What was I thinking? This is impossible." Which made me a better writer, which made me a better producer, which made me a better editor, because I'd go in the editing room and edit film and realize I didn't need all that. So now when I direct, it's like, I don't need that. So typically in a TV show, you shoot 8-hour days. 8-day episodes. when I would direct, I would always make it a 7-day episode. I could save money for the studio, save money for the production, because I knew the choices I would make as a director, I'm making them not as a director, but also as a producer and a responsible financial partner for the studio, which is, I know I'm not going to use this film in the editing room. Why waste the time shooting it?
Right.
And if it doesn't work, it's on me. So I'm responsible. And another thing rarely people in Hollywood do is tell the studios or the financial people, I'll be responsible. Because as soon as you do, they go like, what? Because nobody wants to be responsible for the money. And it's like, I'll be responsible because it's important to do that. And it also makes the efficiency of telling the story that more conscious as you do it.
It gives you credibility.
Well, it gives you credibility. Also, it's like as you're making the decisions in the business thing, it's always in your mind. Do I really need this? Do I need this? Or I really need to do something that will emotionally touch someone. So I'll put the money into that scene and make sure I get that one right. Whereas the other ones, if it's just a plot device, I can do it quickly because it just that domino is just getting us to the next one that is really important, as opposed to looking at them in different ways. And I think that's the same thing in almost any business aspect.
For sure. It's focusing on what's important. So getting back to how you get it out, you had all these projects. How do you organize your day? So one of my working theories is no matter what it is you want to do, if you know how to win your day and you string a lot of days in a row where you win, if you plan properly or even half properly, you're going to be successful at what you do.
I couldn't agree with your statement more. I wish I could say that I figured it all out. The best book on writing I ever read was Stephen King. It's On Writing by Stephen King. And he lays out his day. He writes for 4 hours. He has a lunch. He writes for 4 hours. He takes a walk. Then he does his emails and whatnot. I've had some dealings with Stephen, great guy, as far as taking some of his projects and developing them. But if, let's say it's Friday and it's 4:45 and he finishes a novel, he doesn't take those 15 minutes off. He starts the next one. And when I read that, I thought, you're out of your mind. But on the other hand, it's like, he's so disciplined. It's like, no, this is what I do during these time periods. And his efficiency is, I mean, his productivity is amazing. So I agree that if you can take your time and schedule it and do that, it's probably the best thing you can do in almost any aspect of life. Athletes do it. You know, those ones, you know, your Tom Brady's and your Drew Brees who you watch win Super Bowls and whatnot, and you realize they work harder than anyone else. It's what Kobe Bryant did. It's like, until I figure this out, I'm not stopping. And it disciplines you to accomplish those goals you want. So if you teach that class online, I will come and take it, because I've literally, I'll be totally honest with you, last week I wrote down my schedule of what I wanted to accomplish during this time period, how I wanted to accomplish my day, because I knew I don't have the gun I had to my head before, because everything's up in the air in China. They don't know what they're doing. My European story is kind of sitting there. We don't know what's going to happen with that. So my feeling was, I can do nothing, or I can make my time efficient. Now, in this time, part of what I did was business. Part of what I did was, here's the time I'm going to give to my family and my community and my friends. This is the time I'm going to give to you. In that I realized that this is important. And a lot of this I learned from going on stage to teach or to go and speak to crowds of people. Those of us in Hollywood, well, that sounds kind of self-serving. Those of us in Hollywood, but I've been very fortunate in my life. I've done very well, but we get cynical. You know, in Hollywood, you get really cynical. Everybody out there thinks it's the greatest thing in the world, but you become cynical because it's factory work. It's like anything else. And when I was first going to speak to different writers groups or schools, anything I'm invited to go speak to, I would go, and sometimes I would be, you know, I'm at the effect of whatever crap I had to deal with that day. And my wife, who's she's a, what do you call it, a life coach, and she's by far the most genius human being, and I wouldn't be anywhere I am without her. She's not here to hear this, so I can say it all out loud. No, she's wonderful.
We'll clip this out and send it to her.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, zip it to her. No, but the point is, she would pull me aside when I was about to go out and speak, and she would go like, okay, center yourself. Remember when you were those kids, what it meant when someone came and talked to you. It's kind of sobering. Uh,
It's
and go
hard
do
for you
that
to
for them.
realize you are that person for them. I mean, that's
Right. And,
amazing,
and
right?
so it's your job to go be that for them now. And so every time I go up to speak now, I think about that. I'm at, you know, what I've done is aspirational, and yeah, it's wonderful. As I said, I drive a pickup truck, so I'm not a Hollywood guy. But when I go in front of people, it's like, yeah, like you were saying, you could give classes. You've been doing stuff for 30, 40 years. You have this experience level that you take for granted. They're dying for any nugget of it.
For
So
sure.
if you can go and give them nuggets, and give them nuggets in a way that they can build upon those nuggets, it will be much more than they will get sometimes in film school, in an entire 4 years of film school, of like, here's the 4 things I would do and will help you be successful. So I kind of take that as part of my job these days, not just the efficiency and whatnot of how I can get more product out there. And I want to get more product out there, obviously, like anyone else. But it is kind of like, how can I do something that will help others? Because the more we help each other at this point, the better for all of us.
Well, that's amazing. When we get past the lockdown, I do some mentoring programs, and I'd love to have you talk to some of
I'd
the
be happy
young
to.
folks. Yeah, that's amazing.
I'd be happy to. I've done that now all around the world. When I was in China doing it, a year and a half or whatever it was, I think about a year and a half ago. After I did it, and in China, it's like, if you're doing something people like, somehow there's a grapevine. So Youku, who is owned by Alibaba, who is like their Netflix, I'm in a different city, and they contacted and said, we hear you were doing wonderful things, and will you come and give your presentation to all of our executives? And I'm thinking, okay. And what it was is, you know, I have experience in what happens in China is the kids have grown up watching Western television. None of the adults know how to make it. So the kids are rejecting Chinese television because it doesn't have the rhythms of American or Western television. And they have this weird nexus. They don't know what to do. So they said, will you come and help us by the benefit of what you've experienced? So I did that. And then, you know, out of that, they said, will you develop a show for us? Which is one of the ones I was talking about. So all of these things, I think the more you contribute, the more it's going to come back to you anyhow. But the point of what I'm trying to do more than anything else isn't to contribute. So I'd be happy to speak to your
Awesome
mentor program, because it's like, it's an important thing.
Well, you know, one thing I can give you about what you're pondering. There's a lot of stories I'm trying to tell in this show, and one of it is that there is no one cookie cutter answer that works for everybody. The leadership course that I'm adapting online is centered around finding the people that you admire, the leaders that you admire, isolating those characteristics about that kind of leadership that works for you. So you might look and, you know, you say, oh, this, you know, this politician or this sports person, I don't know, let's stay away from politics and go to sports. You know, like, some people are inspired by you know, Stephen Curry. Some people might be more inspired by Kobe. You know, when you talked about how, you know, how much practice is involved. I took martial arts. I learned Tai Chi from a grandmaster, and I'd been studying a couple of years, and he upped me a level, and I was doing the form, and I realized at some point that this form that I'm studying so diligently, my master does it more often than I do, and he does another 150 other forms. And I'm like, I'm just not putting in, like, I was proud of myself. Like, look, I can do, look how good I am. And I realized like, the real masters are putting in the level of work. But so I think there's something that you're doing that you wouldn't have gotten this successful, you know, without having it. I think for you, it's to isolate what it is that you do when it's working and do it on purpose.
Well, I agree with you. I want to go back to early on in my career. It's like, I would work. I mean, I was like, I'm a teenager in Southern California, early 20s. I'm white as a ghost because, I live 10 minutes or 15 minutes from the beach, and I haven't been there for 4 years because I would every day just teach myself more and more about how to write. You can't learn it. You have to do it. It's just like your Tai Chi or your martial arts master. I can show you the form once. You have to do it 10,000 times, and then you're starting to get it.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so I would teach myself and work and write. And I have tens of thousands and pages of stuff I've written that no one will ever see. And I learn from it. So that was like early on. And even, like even in downtimes during my career, it's like, I'm got a show or I don't have a show, I'm developing, but I would never stop developing. I would always come up with ideas. In some ways, it kind of tortures me now, where I will hear something, oh, that's a great idea, and I write it down. I realize I've got, I got 4,500 of these one-page ideas sitting there that I don't know if anything will ever happen with them, though most of my successes have come from those ideas that were written down 10 years ago. So you never know when it's going to come back. But I agree with you on that, and I think that finding that kind of the processes that work for other people, and that the processes that work for you, and then leaning into those, and then always developing something. One thing I've always admired about like a Kobe or a Stephen Curry or whatnot is that, especially a Kobe or a Michael Jackson, or not Michael Jackson, a Michael Jordan, where it's like they would come back with a new shot the next season. It's sort of like, why do you need a new shot? You're the greatest of all time. Why do you need a new shot? It's like, but that's the point. You're here once, you do the best you can on everything you can and keep expanding. And I think that that's kind of like probably the key to all success. And whether the success is with your family or the success is with your business or whatnot, it's like, what new added value can I bring to this? How much more attention can I give my child? How can I be focused here? How can I do this? How can I work with the same thing within my marriage? How can I work with the same thing within my community and within my business?
Yeah. So anything in particular is there anything you see around, the stay-at-home time that you wish that people would do with their time, or you suggest people do with their time that people aren't already doing?
Well, if anything, and look, and I know it's hard. A lot of people I know are very disciplined. A lot of people are like stunned and freaked out. And I'm both. I'm not going to kid anybody. It's like, I'm not getting up every day and like, I'm writing for 6 hours, and then I'm, jogging for 2 hours, and then I'm playing cribbage with the family, and then I'm going to, no. It's like I go through everything that anybody else is going through. But probably the one key thing I would give to anybody is learn something new. There was a line I wrote down, and I'm going to butcher it. I think it was from the movie Merlin. And it was some of the thing of like, when you're sad, the only way to get out of sadness is to learn something new. And it was such a kind of unique, I'm coming across this, and it's like, I don't think I even saw the movie Merlin. I just came across a quote, and it's like, it's really true. When you get down or anytime something catches you and you get involved in it, you get sucked into something that is opening up a new area within your mind, all those endorphins go off, and it's positive for you in ways that you may not know how that's going to be today, but it will pay off in the long run. And let's face it, if during the next 2 weeks, 2 months, everybody on the planet was able to sit down and go like, I'm just going to take a course. I'm going to fill 2 hours of my day taking a course. We're all going to be a lot smarter at the end of this. And if anything, I would suggest that more than anything else. I would sit down right now to write the Great American Novel, but I can't figure out what it is today. And I kind of think that's what I should do. And I'm going, I have no idea what I would write.
Well, I'm anxious to see what comes out of this, because I'm convinced something interesting is. But, my commitment is that everyone in my orbit come out of this better, and that I want to hear everyone around me, my friends, my family, my loved ones, anyone I talk to, I want them to say a year from now, strangely enough, it was a blessing in disguise.
Mm-hmm.
I never would have had this. I never would have done this. I never learned this. And
Right.
I'm hoping everyone's growing through this. And, I don't want to be Pollyannish, but, I think the way we could similarly, just like Gene Roddenberry invented the flip phone,
Sure.
We have the ideas. Let's learn from this hibernation.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, so
let me just say something right now. It's like, we're meeting right now for the first time, but you're doing something that's really great by just presenting things to people that might open their eyes up to different things that could be possible in their life, ways that you could take this time and make it a blessing. So that's that's a great contribution. So I just want to acknowledge you for it.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. Um, I guess one thing I'm really interested in is you've got, so much work that anyone can go to your IMDb page and see what you've done. Is there something recent that is accessible either on a streaming service or where have you, that of your work that you're really proud of that hasn't gotten enough attention?
Wow. I would think the things I'm most proud of that haven't got enough attention are the projects that were written that were never made, and I don't have any place to actually put those. I would say that if you want to check something out, I would check out either Tin Man or Tin Man. It's TINMAN, 2 words, or check out That's Me Dinging.
Oh, I got you. I'm just looking. I've got. Is
Tin
there
Man.
Which streaming service is it on?
I'm not sure what where Tin Man is. I know that The Pretender now is currently on. I think it's on the Hero Network or the Heroes and somebody else. But you can always, if you Google it, you'll find something.
Yeah.
I think that.
I'll put a link to it. I'll put a link to Tin Man and
Pretender.
How that is. Yeah.
The Pretender really holds it well, and it speaks to something, this humanity inside of us that I just think is more needed than ever. It's like it's the idea of having focus on humanity in a positive way during. I mean, the character's life was always hell. He was, it was Corona quarantine for 30 years for him, and then he was out in the world and he could appreciate that world. And I think coming out of this other end of this, like I say, it's the most beautiful day I've seen in a long time, and I'm sitting in Phoenix, and it's like, maybe I'll sit here and listen to these birds chirp that I ignore because I'm off doing something else. It's like, okay, they were chirping long before I was here, and they'll be chirping long after. Maybe I'll just take a few minutes and take it in and be able to, build on that as I go into my day with everyone else. I mean, how many of us today walk into a grocery store with the mask going on, and you look across the counter and you see that person in a totally different way, or your UPS driver is dropping off something, and it's sort of like, wow, he literally is out there, or she's literally out there as a soldier in an army fighting for all of us.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've taken on, and I go to Vons or shopping or what have you, I thank the checkout.
Yeah.
And I tell them, you're doing really important work. I bet you didn't think that you were signing on for hazardous duty when you did this, but I really appreciate you doing that. And I do. I'm totally.
No, it's smart. I appreciate you doing that, because it's true. It's so true.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what would you like to leave our audience with?
I'm just like, go out and love somebody today, just like that. That that'll be part of your legacy. Tell them a story, make them laugh.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I can't tell you how much fun this was for me, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, I'm happy to do it, and I will keep doing it, and we'll stay in touch.
All right, terrific.